Over the following months on Earth, the Decepticons became increasingly aware of an unknown player in the mix. They did not think the Autobots could have the resources or stealth tactics to perform many of these missions. On one occasion, the Decepticons had prepared an energon transport from the mines. The nature of the landscape led to the construction of an underground railway because of the volatility of the crystals. The Decepticons created the railway, then several caches along it as they uncovered more unrefined energon. When there was an issue announced, Knockout was sent to investigate. When he arrived, Knockout found a curious sight. There were pieces of equipment that were carefully dismantled and piled up. There was also the collection of hidden tracking devices, inoperative and in a pile. They had begun to set them on their energon piles and caches because of the interference. Thought Knockout. He was intrigued and concerned. He had made the devices and would now have to explain to Megatron that they had been discovered and disabled. As he continued investigating, he saw the precision cuts on the equipment. The mechanisms had been strategically disabled by someone who seemed familiar with the design and how to best cripple it. This wasn't sabotage, Knockout said, surprised. It was surgery. On another occasion, the Autobots and Decepticons were engaged in a battle when their communications systems experienced an interference. Their communications chief was unable to clear it. There was a sort of static of ancient Cybertronian symbols that filled the feeds, and radio contact was inoperative. Soundwave sent Laserbeak to investigate and encountered a signature that should not exist. Then, Starscream had gone to check on a mine with his strike squadron. Something had happened. Then they, along with a group of miners, were found tied up and not a single one could describe what had happened. They said that everything went dark, even though there was previously a blue light emitting from the energon crystals. Suddenly there was darkness, gusts of wind, and a faint glow of orange here or there. Then they all awoke in a circular formation, bound and unable to move. The energon they had been mining was gone. After returning to the Nemesis, they met with Megatron. Megatron stood at the head of the projection table, his clawed hands braced on either side. "Tell me again, Starscream. How can a lone warrior disable an entire strike squadron and then vanish without leaving a single casualty?" Starscream's wings twitched, his optics burned with embarrassment. Despite noticing patterns of sabotage, the Decepticons were unable to pinpoint what was going on, who was interfering with their supply lines. They began to increase security at all the mines. The Autobots, increasingly desperate to get energon, had to approach in even riskier conditions. One day, RC and Bumblebee were exploring an area where Ratchet had read faint energon signals. Optimus and Bulkhead were at another site, also scouting for energon. RC had a scanning device and walked through the desert landscape. They came upon a tunnel and suspected that it might be an abandoned mine. "Well, Bee, we better check it out," she said. Bumblebee nodded. They knew they would have to be cautious with the increased Decepticon security around the mines. RC informed Ratchet of their finding and intention, then continued in. Ratchet acknowledged the transmission, but was growing increasingly concerned. He had been unable to contact Optimus and Bulkhead since they had left. He tried again, unsuccessfully. "RC, be careful. I cannot reach Optimus at the moment. You may not have backup should you need it," Ratchet relayed nervously. RC and Bumblebee continued in. The signal strength grew. They came around the next corner and found some energon on the far wall. "Here it is, Bee. Let's get it and get back to base," RC said. Bumblebee ran toward the energon when they heard an unsettling laugh. "Starscream," RC said through gritted teeth. "Ah, Autobots. Come to interfere with another mining operation? Well, not this time," Starscream said. Next to Starscream, up on a ledge in the cave, was Dreadwing. The Autobots began opening fire and trying to take cover. As Dreadwing engaged them, Starscream reported back to Megatron. "Lord Megatron, we have discovered who has been interfering with our operations. The two smaller Autobots are here," Starscream said into the comm. On the Decepticon ship, the Nemesis, Megatron laughed loudly. "Well done, Starscream. Let us not miss out on this opportunity to cripple the Autobot cause." Megatron called for a ground bridge through which he, Airachnid, and Knockout would join the battle. While RC and Bumblebee were trying to hold off Starscream and Dreadwing, there was an explosion. Fortunately, this cave had a large vent above them, and the concussive force did not get trapped within. RC made to go back toward Bumblebee so that they could make a plan of what to do next. When she approached Bumblebee, he was critically struck by Dreadwing. "No! B!" RC shouted. She turned and saw Megatron, Knockout, and Airachnid entering. "Ratchet, we need backup. Bumblebee is down. It was an ambush." RC shouted into her comm as she tried to provide cover for Bumblebee. The Decepticons were laughing and surrounding her. Megatron laughed loudly. "Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide," he said with a smile. Ratchet, who could still not reach Optimus, pinpointed RC and Bumblebee's locations and set the ground bridge to a timer. He would enter and have exactly 60 seconds before it closed. With the children still at school, they would have no one to open the bridge after that time. The ground bridge opened and Ratchet went through. He immediately ran into RC and Bumblebee. "RC!" he shouted. They were huddled behind a large boulder and Bumblebee was down near their feet. Ratchet looked at him, then back at the ground bridge. It was not close enough to evacuate without coming under fire. "RC, the ground bridge is on a timer. We must hurry," Ratchet shouted into the chaos. RC turned to look from him to the ground bridge, to Bumblebee. "You take him. I'll provide covering fire," RC shouted. Not seeing a better option, Ratchet agreed. He grabbed Bumblebee from under the arms and began dragging him backward through the cavern. RC stood between them and the many Decepticons that had gathered there. As they left the relative safety of the boulder they had taken cover behind, they realized they had no hope of reaching the ground bridge. Doing everything they could to get Bumblebee through, RC was struck and slammed against the far wall of the cavern. "No! RC!" Ratchet shouted. Not only was RC injured as well, he no longer had covering fire and had to drop Bumblebee in order to return fire. Dreadwing came at him with his large sword, and Ratchet fought back. Desperate to get his Autobots back through, he fought with everything he had, but he was no match for the very skilled Decepticons. Dreadwing slashed Ratchet's dominant arm, then his opposite leg. As Ratchet fell to the ground, he saw the ground bridge close. He closed his optics. Today, he, RC, and Bumblebee would become one with the Allspark. Ratchet could barely remain conscious as he looked across the battleground. He pictured Optimus and Bulkhead returning to base long after it was too late. With 3 fallen Autobots, what little hope there had been of winning the war would be lost. Ratchet turned to look up at the towering silhouette of Megatron. "Well, well, well, Ratchet. It has been too long. It's too bad Optimus isn't here to see you off. The two of you are old friends, as I understand," Megatron said. Megatron raised his weapon to Ratchet, who lay on the ground. Then suddenly something caught his attention. Ratchet had looked somewhere past Megatron, above them in the cavern. Megatron looked up as well. Something in the distance glistened. It was hard to make out, just cutting through the air. There was no sound. "What the? Something's jamming our communications," Knockout said. The lights in the cavern began to flicker. An unnatural darkness fell into the cavern, despite it having an opening above. "What in the name of—" Megatron began to say. Then, the blur of objects to his left and right. As he turned to his right, Knockout and Dreadwing were struck in the shoulder by a short spear, followed by an electrocution that rendered them unconscious. He had heard the same sound to his left, and found Airachnid and Starscream in the same condition. Megatron growled and looked forward in time to see a stealthy aircraft transform in front of him, stand, then kick him powerfully in the chest. He flew backward into the wall opposite, and it came crumbling down on him. Ratchet, watching all of this, looked up at Stillknight, shocked. Stillknight had turned her back to Megatron and offered Ratchet a helping hand in standing. He took her hand, still shocked, then said, "While I appreciate you saving me, you may have only delayed my death briefly. Megatron is returning." He pointed behind her with his uninjured arm. Still looking at Ratchet, Stillknight took a device like a coin out and pressed it with her thumb and index finger. She then stepped back calmly and dropped it onto the ground in front of Ratchet. "He's coming back," Ratchet said warningly. Megatron was in flight and angrily flying at her. As Stillknight had dropped the device onto the ground, she watched the shield activate, separating the injured Autobots from the battle. "I earned my medal in the Pits of Kaon!" Stillknight was facing Ratchet. Then she partially took flight, flipping backward, just as Megatron went in to tackle her. She hit him with grapple hooks, then landed, tensioned them, and threw him back. Now she took her blades and prepared for proper battle. Firstly, the other 4 Decepticons were released from the spear effects. Megatron was returning as well. Ratchet was calling for base and calling for Optimus to no avail. Stillknight took her blades and took a moment to synchronize with their rhythm. The 4 Decepticons were still recovering and discerning what was happening. Megatron was back and said, "You dare attack me?" He began swinging his sword and attempting to attack. She easily evaded his attacks and then met his blade. She fought with great precision that appeared almost effortless. After a few defensive blocks, she sliced through his forearm blade. He screamed angrily and looked at his forearm. At this point, the others had begun to attack. Surrounded by the 4 of them, Megatron soon called Dreadwing for his sword. Stillknight effectively defended against their attacks. Then, as they continued fighting, she began to disable their armaments. Ratchet had gone to check on the others, then called the children to try to make their way to the Autobot base and open the ground bridge. As Stillknight had cut through Dreadwing's large cannon, he smiled and flipped open his detonator, looking at her. In response, Stillknight tilted her shoulder nearest him and showed him she did not have an explosive upon it. Dreadwing was shocked, then began searching, first himself, then the others. Knockout, watching the whole encounter, began doing a sort of dance, checking whether he had been affected. Starscream got up slowly after she had injured one of his wingtips. On his back, he heard a beeping. Dreadwing noticed and ran toward him. Knockout yelled, "Grenade!" and dove for cover. Airachnid was bound by Stillknight's grappling hooks and unable to move. Dreadwing managed to reach Starscream in time to deactivate the device. Megatron had sustained injuries to one arm and one leg. Dreadwing's weapons were both destroyed. Starscream was unable to fly, Airachnid was bound, and Knockout was afraid to scratch his finish. Starscream looked from Stillknight to the others and called for an immediate ground bridge. Stillknight, waiting patiently, allowed their retreat. Megatron protested as Knockout and Starscream drug him through the ground bridge. Dreadwing grabbed Airachnid as he looked back to Stillknight with curiosity. They disappeared through the ground bridge. Stillknight turned back to Ratchet and RC, who was now awake. They looked shocked and injured. She collected the shield generator and stowed it, walking over to them. "Ratchet, we're at the base," the voice of Raphael could be heard over the communications device. Stillknight bent down to Bumblebee, who was severely injured. "Raphael, open the ground bridge. We have wounded," Ratchet responded, attempting to lift RC, although injured himself. Stillknight scanned Bumblebee, and his injuries were critical. Several internal biomechanisms had been affected. "Stillknight, can you assist Bumblebee back to Omega-1?" Ratchet shouted as he struggled to get himself and RC through the ground bridge. Stillknight scanned them and felt that the other 2 would be all right with Autobot medical treatment. Bumblebee, however, was critical. He might need a more ancient treatment. Ratchet had turned his back and continued walking. Stillknight had taken flight, then hit Bumblebee with her grappling hooks. Ratchet glanced back, expecting to see her assisting Bumblebee into the ground bridge, and instead saw her lift the Autobot up and away in flight. "No! Stillknight, come back!" he tried to shout. He could not follow as he barely found the strength to return with RC. The ground bridge closed after they made it through, and he fell to the ground with her. "Ratchet, what happened?" the children shouted. As he began losing consciousness, he told the children to contact Optimus. "Where's Bumblebee?" he heard Raphael ask before everything went dark. A day later, Bumblebee's optics had slowly opened. Stillknight had placed Icona plants from her own garden near him. After some encouragement from Stillknight, they chose to bond with him and offer him their energon. Stillknight sat with him and guided him in meditation similar to how Zephron had done for her long ago. While Bumblebee appeared to only beep, he was able to communicate with other Cybertronians in doing so. Where am I?" he asked as he woke. Stillknight had been guiding his spark rhythm to ease it and encouraging the Icona to bind with him. She rose from meditation and came over to him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Stillknight?" he asked. She nodded. "Where are the others?" Bumblebee asked. She showed a picture of Omega-1 on the screen. Bumblebee looked around and saw a large structure. He could see many plants around him, and some comforting lanterns above. The ambiance resembled some sort of ancient meditation center, and he found that calming. As he looked more closely at the plants, He saw that several were emitting tendrils that appeared almost fiber optic in nature. They were reaching out to him and attached to him. Shocked, he instinctively tried to remove them. Then Stillknight placed her hands on his shoulders with moderate pressure. As he had done so, the plants withdrew nervously in response to the change in spark rhythm. Stillknight began to focus once more on guiding him and his spark rhythm to be calm once more. As she did, he did feel a sense of tranquility spill over him. He felt relaxed, and as he glanced down, the plants reached out to him once again. A pulse of light could be seen traveling from the plants into him as they did so. He felt so relaxed, in fact, he decided to power down for a bit longer. "Ratchet?" a small voice asked. Ratchet groaned. "Ratchet!" said the voice, louder this time. Ratchet flinched as the high-pitched sound entered his audio receptors. "Yes, Raphael, I'm here," he grumbled. "You've been out for 2 days. We were worried about you," Raphael said. Two days?" he said, suddenly trying to get up. "Whoa!" Raphael exclaimed as he slid off of Ratchet's chest. Optimus had heard the commotion and come to Ratchet's side. He caught Raphael and placed him safely nearby. He then placed his hand on Ratchet's shoulders. "Easy, old friend. You've lost a lot of energon. You are still recovering," Optimus said soothingly. "RC? And Bumblebee?" Ratchet asked, still trying to get up. "It is all right, Ratchet. RC is here. She too is recovering. We have placed her in stasis," Optimus added. "And Bumblebee?" Ratchet asked the Prime standing above him. Optimus took a moment and did not answer. "Ratchet, we were going to ask you that," Raphael said sadly. "The Knight," Ratchet responded, grasping his head. "Stillknight?" The voice of Jack sounded from further away. "Yes, she saved us, and attacked the Decepticons ruthlessly." "Optimus, if she is on our side, we may yet win this war," Ratchet said. He had closed his optics, trying to focus through the pain. "Ratchet, where is Bumblebee?" Optimus asked. "The Knight took him. I asked her to bring him here, to our base. When I glanced back, she had lifted him and was flying away with him," Ratchet responded. Perhaps she took him to provide him with medical treatment," Optimus replied thoughtfully. "He's an Autobot. She should have listened. Although," Ratchet's voice trailed off, "if I have been unconscious for 2 days," Ratchet shuddered to think, had Stillknight had listened to him, Bumblebee would likely not have made it. Optimus filled in the blanks through both what Ratchet said and what he didn't say. "Rest, old friend. We will locate Bumblebee," Optimus said. Optimus walked over to where Jack and Miko were. Raphael had to run after him. "Jack, can you contact Stillknight?" Optimus asked. "And ask if she has a guest?" "Sure thing, Optimus," Jack replied. Jack hit the button on his wrist controller once. There was a beep. Then a holographic image of Stillknight appeared. "Stillknight, well, we wanted to ask you if, you knew where Bumblebee was," Jack asked. Stillknight's hologram turned into Bumblebee recovering at her base. "Stillknight, it is I, Optimus Prime. Would you allow us to visit your base and Bumblebee?" he asked. Stillknight responded by providing coordinates. Raphael shouted, "I want to come! I want to see Bee!" Optimus activated the ground bridge, and both Jack and Raphael ran to it as well. "Bulkhead, remain here and look after RC and Ratchet," Optimus said. "No problem," Bulkhead replied. Optimus, Jack, and Raphael walked through the ground bridge to find Stillknight waiting for them. Her base was dark, but you could see a room with blue silvery light coming through in the hallway. They ground bridged near the communication center of her base. "Stillknight, I am told you assisted the Autobots in distress. Thank you for helping them," Optimus said. Stillknight nodded toward him, then saw the children running toward her. "Where's Bee?" the smaller one shouted. She bent down and offered to pick them both up. They climbed on her hand, and she placed them on her shoulder. Stillknight walked through the communications center and past the meditation chamber, into the medical bay. This was nothing like any Cybertronians were used to. As a physician, Thisara had been trained in modern medical practices. Stillknight, however, had been saved by the Knights and taken to Icona, where she had learned the ways of traditional healing through meditation and herbs. As a reflection of both elements of her past, this medical bay was a mixture of devices and plants, both modern and traditional. Bumblebee lay on a bed recovering. He was surrounded by plants that were offering him their energon. "Bee!" Raphael shouted and tried to climb down. Stillknight reached for him and placed him near the Autobot. "Is he going to be okay?" Raphael asked. Stillknight looked at him and nodded. "What, is all this, Stillknight? I haven't seen Ratchet have anything like this. They appear to be Cybertronian plants?" Jack asked. Stillknight looked at him, then pulled up a screen with the different plants from Icona and their biology. She then showed Icona as a sort of intermediate biology bridging Cybertronian and organic life. "Stillknight, what is Bumblebee's current condition? Is it safe to wake him?" Optimus asked. Stillknight nodded. Optimus stood on the far side of the medical bed from Stillknight. She placed her hand on Bumblebee's shoulder and began to focus. Jack, still standing on Stillknight's shoulder, could hear a faint hum and feel a slight vibration emanating from the night. Bumblebee began to regain consciousness. He blinked his optics and saw Raphael looking at him. This time, Bumblebee was quite calm, not wanting to injure the plants that had given him life. "Hey, Raph," Bumblebee beeped. "Bee!" Raph hugged his friend. Optimus had come closer to his Autobot and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder. "Optimus," Bumblebee beeped with a smile. "It is good to see you, Bumblebee," Optimus said. "Optimus, are RC and Ratchet okay? We were ambushed and we couldn't get away. We tried calling for backup, but only Ratchet could help us. They took him down too. Then we couldn't activate the ground bridge. We couldn't contact you, and the children were not at the base." Bumblebee settled this rather quickly, as he was concerned and desperate to explain. "It is all right, Bumblebee. They are both safe. As I understand, Stillknight came to your aid. Bulkhead and I were out of communications range and were unable to receive any of the transmissions until after the battle was over," Optimus said. Bumblebee looked from Optimus to Stillknight at his side. "Thank you for helping us. And thank you for saving me," Bumblebee said. In response, Stillknight typed onto the screen nearby, "I did not save you. The Icona did." She then motioned to the plants near him. "Stillknight, you have done much to help my Autobots, and we are in your debt. Is Bumblebee strong enough to come back to our base?" Optimus asked. Stillknight looked at Bumblebee, then rescanned him. She then nodded to Optimus, and the Icona began withdrawing their tendrils. As they did, Stillknight carefully picked them up and placed them back into her garden with the others. Bumblebee's bed then tilted, and he was able to stand. Both Optimus and Stillknight stood near him, in case he needed assistance. Raphael was on Bumblebee's shoulder, and Jack was still on Stillknight's. "Wow, I feel great, Stillknight," Bumblebee said as he stood and stretched. He looked over to the garden of plants that had saved him with curiosity. "Stillknight, I know there is much you have already done, but as our physician is currently in need of medical treatment himself, would you be willing to come to our base and monitor his care and that of RC?" Optimus asked. Stillknight nodded. When the Prime and the Knight arrived with the children and Bumblebee to Omega-1, they found Wheeljack and Bulkhead there. "Hey, Chief," Wheeljack said, nodding at Optimus. "Stillknight." He greeted the Knight as well. Stillknight nodded, then walked over to RC and Ratchet. She scanned both of them. "Hey, Bee, where have you been?" Bulkhead asked, locking arms with Bumblebee in greeting. "Oh, I hope you don't mind, Optimus," Bulkhead said, motioning at Wheeljack. "Jackie was nearby, and with us so short-staffed, it made sense to invite him over." "A wise precaution, Bulkhead," Optimus said, agreeing. Jack was still on Stillknight's shoulder. "How are they?" Jack asked apprehensively. In the background, Bumblebee and Bulkhead were catching up. Stillknight pulled up RC's injury on the screen. She needed a minor operation in order to repair an energon vessel from leaking, and needed more energon transfusions. Can you fix her? Jack asked. Stillknight nodded, then pulled up the results of her scan of Ratchet on the screen. Ratchet had also lost much of his energon and had wounds to his right arm and right leg. Will you use the plants like with Bumblebee? Jack asked. Stillknight shook her head. She did not think RC or Ratchet would be able to bond with the Icona sufficiently in order to enlist their support and their healing. That would take extensive training and a willingness to engage in something foreign to them. The doctor in particular would not likely be able to put his modern medicine prejudice aside enough to form the bond. Stillknight determined what would be required in order to assist the Autobots, then turned back. What's the word, Doc? Asked Wheeljack. Stillknight placed a photo of Energon on the screen, then a map within her base. You require Energon to help them, Optimus asked. Stillknight nodded and pointed at the storeroom at her base at the end of the path indicated in the map. We will retrieve it, Optimus said. Stillknight nodded, then began to prepare RC, the more critical patient, for surgery.